All right. I'm Oren Kaplan. I work for Pentera. I lead Middle East and Africa. And Mr. Sheikh Salman, you want to introduce yourself? Although
So Salman Khalifa, CEO of the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Agency in Bahrain.
Thank you so much. So the goal for today's Fireside Chat for us was to bring a few things that I think are concerning for all of us that work in cybersecurity. I believe that we all are facing a lot of challenges in our work, in our daily lives. And the goal today for me and the Sheikh was to bring to you a few subjects that we believe are areas of concerns, a few narratives, and our hope that today you all can go out with something back home, implement back in your teams, think about some new practices or new things that you have to implement in order to really improve your resilience and be ready for tomorrow's threat. So I think the first topic to concern is can we be patch perfect? And I'd like by kind of starting and talking about how the advancement in technology is bringing a lot of devices into our environment. We see so many vulnerabilities that are coming up. You know, every day there's a new vulnerability, just to mention Log4Shell, which happened last year, Print Nightmare, Printer Bug. We're drowning in a sea, in an ocean of vulnerabilities. And the question is, you know, there's a cat and mouse race that we keep on seeing between the security team and the IT team and how to patch, when to patch, how fast to do it, which one to go first. I mean, it's a huge, let's say, cat and mouse race, like I said before, to go and to be patch perfect. And I'd like to hear your opinion, Sheikh, about how can teams really face these challenges of patching constantly, all these vulnerabilities, and still being able to look and see where are those weak spots in front of them.
I think just to complement your graphic designer, captured the core of the problem quite well.
Thank you.
Windows is everywhere. And so, yes, it is a challenge. We all face it in IT. Every month, we've got Patch Tuesday come along, and we need to patch. And it's an endless task. It does not end. And if, like many organizations that we know, they don't do a good job in patching, and it accumulates over time. And there are many reasons. We know we need to test whether this patch is really going to negatively affect the service or not. And it's a never, as you said, never-ending battle. So where do we start? As the NCSC, we see that vulnerabilities is the #1 problem, a reason for an attack. And so we want you to patch everything, but that's not a realistic expectation. We want the most important patch started first, and that has to do with the risk landscape, the risk of the product that you have, and the priority based on the kill chain. So you know that with this vulnerability, they're going to get to my product first. So I think I need to focus on those top 10 first that are more important than the others. And I think by looking at understanding an infrastructure and how it relates to the kill chain, then we can prioritize that first above all. And that is not easy to define. It's a good statement, but how do you practically do that? And that is dependent on your environment, and every environment is unique. Every asset is unique that you have. So you need a simpler way, a more automated way to help you identify that quickly. Like the way you identify vulnerabilities, you can't depend on going down to the systems level and say, I need a CVE 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. No, we depend on tools to identify these vulnerabilities, and we need tools to identify the most important ones relative to our environment, because everything is important. We need to identify what's the most important.
That's actually, I mean, very encouraging to hear because, you know, when we see the amount of vulnerabilities that are being introduced every year now, I mean, only last year more than 15,000 new vulnerabilities came. Add them to the hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities that we have, and I think what the Sheikh is saying is absolutely right. We need to understand the impact of the vulnerabilities. Before patching them, this is how we prioritize. When we understand where will exploiting that vulnerability lead an attacker, then we can decide which vulnerability is more critical for us as an organization to actually patch first. And I really like what you said about understanding the impact and only then pretty much working on the remediation.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're going to move to our next subject for today. So the next subject for today is basically hackers use automation. They have to be right one time. We have to be right 100% of the time. And this is our challenge. And CISOs, CIOs, security teams today are constantly battling endless attacks that are coming in an automated fashion. And I mean, the adversaries are growing and they're using automation against us. So the question, Sheikh, is how do we actually deal with the ongoing increasing threat and the lack of people, because there's a huge shortage in talent out there. How do we bring in automation? How can we really use the fact that technology can help us as opposed to the huge shortage of people that are security experts that can come and help us?
We all know there's a global shortage of cyber experts. I mean, I think the last quote was several million people by 2025. It's always in the millions. And with IT, all of us in this room suffer because we can't get the right skills. And we need every skill. And so we end up outsourcing. Now, one of the most interesting things, whether it's cybersecurity, IT operation, or development, everyone has moved to automation. So if we talk about software development, we have a pipeline where we can launch it, test the functional test, do the integration test, do the source code review in one click. Historically, it took us a month or two for every new version of an application, and that was a nightmare. With automation, we're able to deploy a version every week. That is transformative. And so you see automation in even building the cloud, where with certain scripts, you can deliver entire infrastructure in a click, whereas in the past, it took us months. And I think we need automation now to come into the cybersecurity realm. And specifically for us is, testing for gaps in our security infrastructure. We need that, and the need is because of the lack of resources, and from human resources. And we need them with us to make this job easier and faster with leveraging all the current resources we have. If we needed to scale, we need to triple the number of resources that we have. We need to triple the engagement of outsourcing that we do. And those companies are actually suffering because they can't meet up the customer demand. So it is ever increasing. And with cyber now coming up, where we have standards coming up at the national level, where the central banks enforce audits to happen, they need to verify that you've tested your environment. That's going to add even greater pressure. Now it's going to be oil and gas. And then you're going to have other private businesses coming and needing pen testing services, needing auditing services. All of that needs to be automated. And I think that's the only way forward for us.
So I can tell you that I couldn't agree more with the Sheikh. Automation is something that we all are incorporating right now. We see this huge shortage of security professionals, and we all are facing it. I mean, the threats are growing. We as teams are not growing as much. I mean, at the end, cyber is a cost center for most organizations. And the question, how do we security professionals really take these challenges and we incorporate things like automation in order to really assist us in our day-to-day work. And I think this, from what we see around the world, is a huge challenge for organization to go from compliance to standardization and then to security. All right? And this is something I'd like to ask you. How do you see the compliance regulation, and how can you, as the authority here in Bahrain for cybersecurity, how can you enforce standardization that can really be helpful and make the organizations at the end of the day feel that, hey, you know what, I'm secure, I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do, and potentially the next breach will not happen to me?
So it is a complicated ask. Many people, for example, believe I have a firewall, I'm secure. That's nothing further from the truth. There are security is, if I can, as an analogy, an onion. The more layers you add to it, you just keep need to add and add and add, and I think one layer of that is compliance and standards, because standards will be one level up. And many organizations think if I patch, do my awareness, have the right tools in place, have the right operational procedure and incident response procedure, I'm good. And that's not entirely correct. You are far better than what you were on. But there is nuances in organizations. You see that the firewall, as I mentioned, is there. But how does the firewall relate to the EDR? How does that relate to the segmentation? How is the implementation of Zero Trust and the IPS going? Are they really working together? Are they really in sync? And that's where architecture comes along. That's where the misconfigurations come along that open up that door. And so there are so many paths to get to the crown jewels. Any one misconfiguration can lead to the result that we are trying to avoid. So I think by automating the mindset of the attacker, you can identify avenues and gaps. And I think all the MITRE techniques that are out there is an excellent roadmap for us to figure out what are the ingress points into our network and have we validated to that. And I think that's where we should think. Yes, standards are critical. Compliance is critical. But that's not the end all. But it's the step as you go up, then you can validate. But if you don't have a standard, if you are not compliant, the attacker will enter from everywhere. It's your organization is a sieve. What complying with standards is you've blocked off all the known problems, and then you're testing it out, your theory. And I think that's how I see it.
Perfect. I think that the Sheikh said it completely right, and I want to also show you this pyramid of how compliance is the base layer that we see in the market today. Then we move to standardization and then security, and this is exactly what organizations today are doing. So before we reach the final point, I'd like to kind of summarize what we've talking about today. So first of all, me and the Sheikh spoke about the ocean of vulnerabilities. How do we prioritize? How do we actually work on the right vulnerabilities first, and how do we prioritize? Second point that we want to mention is the fact that hackers use automation while we have shortage in people. How do we really face those challenges? Third point is the standardization, compliance, and security, and how do they all fit together? The last point, which we want to talk about, is kind of security validation and why we believe it's important. So one of the things that we see about security validation is that we keep on investing. Better firewall, better EDR, better SOC team, right? We keep on investing in solutions. But do we actually stop and validate that they're actually working? Are they actually working as they were promised to be worked before when we acquired these solutions? Do we keep on testing them as we go along. And we believe in Pentera and in general when we meet with a lot of companies out there that security validation is extremely important. It's the next narrative because if you don't validate that your security controls will work and will hold against tomorrow's attack, then you're actually assuming. And if you're assuming, you don't know. So how do we actually take security validation? How do we make sure that our controls that we've invested, like I said, the SOC, the EDR, the NDR, all those usual suspects, how important it is in your mind, Sheikh, to validate our security controls on an ongoing basis, and not to do it once a year or twice a year, but actually to do this on an ongoing basis and make sure that we know what is working when that, adversary come in.
So we've all in this room have invested in lots of tech. And we depend on third parties most of the time to implement them on our behalf, or we depend on our team. But I want to give you just some extreme stories that can sort of wake us up. One of the companies we went to, or organizations we went to, we said there was a security breach. We looked into we investigated and said, no, we've got everything. We've got our EDR, we've got a firewall. And upon a quick investigation, we've identified that the firewall was allowed to let everyone in and let everyone out. Now, that project had been signed off, the vendor has got his money, and what's ridiculous about it is that if they didn't have a firewall, they would have had the same result. There was no validation. There was no validation of anything whatsoever. And I know this is an extreme case. EDR, on the other hand, we've seen many organizations where they've activated their EDR, and there was an attack and something happened. Upon investigation, they said, hey, I don't know what happened. I have an EDR, but it wasn't able to stop it. So when you looked at it, it wasn't enabled or activated. It was just there listening. And, as phase one. Phase two was about now block everything. So the team did not activate the EDR to do its job. No one was able to validate. If you see that just snippet of it, we will understand that this is the basics. Imagine the kind of problems we will face on the minor misconfigurations. So we need to find a mechanism to validate every single implementation that we have and every solution that we depend on for our security. And that cannot happen easily because we all don't have the subject matter experts to help validate every single product, or else we will be a massive organization. And sometimes we need to have, and we do depend on the third-party companies, which most of the times or sometimes will not do such a great job. And we need something to tell us, hey, this did not happen correctly. Your EDR is not working correctly, based on generic, procedures and chests. And that's what you want. You want to ensure that you have the basic level up and running and it's validated. What would be more interesting after that is then something challenges that EDR to react. You want to say, hey, I've triggered it, but your EDR did not react. That's one level up. And so, yes, we need to not only validate the actual implementations and product that we have, but continuously challenge that EDR or other firewall or your IPS. We all need to continuously test. And to be honest, we are working on that. We were trying to find a way to do that and to make sure that we are able to challenge our tools and make sure they do what they claim to do.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. I think that, security validation, we believe, especially in Pentera, that it should be as frequent as the changes that happen in the environment. We basically need to maximize on the solutions we have right now and not continuously go and buy more and more. So I want to leave you with one statistic, guys, before we adjourn today, is how much the security expenditure is going up, but on the other hand, as you can see, the loss due to ransomware and cyber attacks is even growing much exponentially. So I'd like to thank the Czech for today.
Thank you.